The rot didn't start with a headline. It started with a whisper, a staffer, a slip of the tongue at a Capitol Hill happy hour, a joke told a little too loudly. AOC's new guy? Total mystery, no papers, no vetting, straight out of a community center, if you know what I mean. The words were supposed to disappear into the cheap bourbon haze. They didn't. By morning, the whisper had grown teeth, and by noon, it was clawing its way through the marble walls of Congress. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez paced her office, heels clicking sharp and frantic against the polished floor. The sun blazed through the windows, catching the edge of the framed posters on the wall, hopeful slogans about equity, justice, revolution. Now they seemed to mock her. "I want a list," she barked, jabbing a finger at her chief of staff. "Names. Anyone who's leaking." The aide nodded stiffly, already backing toward the door. Panic wasn't new in politics, but this was different, because for the first time in her career, AOC wasn't fighting over ideology. She was fighting for survival. The story hit Breitbart by 3 p.m. Exclusive: AOC hired a legal immigrant as senior communications director. Paid with your tax dollars. By 3:15, Fox News was running with it. By 3:30, TomHoman saw the headline and smiled. Not the smile of a man relishing someone else's downfall. The smile of a soldier recognizing a crack in the enemy's armor. Across town, in a modest leather chair worn by years of bureaucratic wars, Homan leaned forward, phone pressed to his ear. "Get Benny. We're going to need the full file on this Diego de la Vega clown." A pause, then Homan added, voice low and lethal, "And start prepping the DOJ package. We're going for blood." Meanwhile, in AOC's office, the walls closed in. Diego de la Vega, her shiny new senior communications director, sat silent in the corner, face pale. He wasn't smiling now, not the charming grin he used on Instagram, not the fiery speeches he posted under AOC's voice accounts. Only fear, raw and unvarnished. AOC spun on him, voice hissing. "They don't have proof. They can't have proof." Diego swallowed hard, choosing his next words with the caution of a man walking through a minefield. "Congresswoman, my DACA status. It lapsed." Silence, heavy, crushing. AOC closed her eyes just for a second, because she understood. Not just the scandal, not just the headlines. The law, federal felony aiding and abetting, obstruction of immigration enforcement. She had given them everything they needed, and there would be no bailout. Not this time. At ICE headquarters, TomHoman clicked through the initial reports. Social media posts, employment records, flight manifests. The evidence stacked itself into a noose. Benny, his trusted analyst, leaned in. "This guy isn't just out of status. He's been fundraising for radical open borders groups, some with direct links to organizations the DHS flagged as hostile actors." Homan's eyes narrowed. "And she put him on taxpayer payroll." Not a question, a verdict. Benny hesitated. "Tom, are you sure you want to go nuclear?" Homan didn't even look up. "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about the rule of law." That night, on Tucker Carlson's show, the first tremors shook the nation. Tucker's blue eyes burned into the camera as he said the words that would ricochet across every screen in America. "Tonight, breaking news: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, accused of illegally hiring an undocumented immigrant inside her congressional office, paying him nearly $80,000 a year of your money." The chyron blazed across the screen. AOC scandal: taxpayers funded illegal hiring? Within minutes, phrases like AOC scandal, illegal hiring, and taxpayer fraud surged across social media, dominating every trending list. The fuse was lit, and TomHoman had just reached for the gasoline. In a quiet side office of the Department of Justice, a career prosecutor pulled a file across her desk, stamped in bold black ink. Priority Review, Public Integrity Division. The cover sheet bore two names. Subject 1, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Subject 2, Diego de la Vega. The prosecutor frowned, skimming the first page. This wasn't a routine ethics violation. This was potential criminal conspiracy. And if Homan had the documentation he promised, this could become the case that shattered the progressive darling's career. Or worse, landed her behind bars. Back in her office, AOC tore through documents, desperate to find a lifeline. "We spin it," she muttered. "We frame it as compassion, as standing up for the voiceless." Her media strategist, a gaunt man with thick glasses, shook his head grimly. "Compassion doesn't matter if DOJ drops an indictment." AOC slammed her palm against the desk. "Then we make it political. We say it's racist. We say it's xenophobic. We say it's about silencing brown voices." The strategist hesitated, because even in D.C., even among the cynical grifters and shameless operatives, there were limits, and covering for hiring a criminal alien wasn't just bad optics. It was suicide. Across town, TomHoman sat before a microphone at a small conservative radio studio. His voice was low, measured, devastating. "If you or I hired an illegal alien and paid them out of taxpayer funds, we'd be in handcuffs before the morning commute was over." A pause. Then Homan delivered the line that would echo across the country. "It's time to find out if the laws of this nation apply to everyone or just the little people." The host, barely containing his excitement, leaned in. "Tom, are you saying—" Homan didn't flinch. "I'm saying it's time for the DOJ to do its job. I'm saying Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez needs to be prosecuted." The line lit up, and outside the studio walls, the political aftershocks had only just begun. TomHoman didn't sleep that night, not out of anxiety, out of calculation. Every hour mattered. Every minute the story spread without opposition was another nail in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's political coffin. And Homan was a man who knew how to drive nails deep. By sunrise, every major network had picked up the scandal. ABC's morning anchors danced delicately around the story, injecting words like alleged and unconfirmed. But the headlines scrolling beneath them screamed louder than their cautious tones. Meanwhile, Fox News sharpened their blades. Banner after banner flashed across screens nationwide. Taxpayer funds used to hire illegal immigrant. AOC faces potential felony charges. In her office, AOC watched the coverage with glassy eyes. The coffee on her desk sat untouched, growing cold. Across from her, Diego de la Vega fidgeted in his chair, his face a mask of pale dread. He had tried to apologize earlier. She had cut him off with a glare sharp enough to draw blood. Now she sat still, jaw clenched, as her chief of staff rattled off bad news like a drumbeat of doom. 3 major outlets confirmed the DOJ opened an inquiry. Judicial Watch filed a FOIA request. TomHoman's going on Hannity tonight. AOC gripped the armrest, nails digging into the leather. "He's a dinosaur," she hissed. "A racist, anti-immigrant dinosaur." The words rang hollow even in her own ears, because somewhere deep inside, buried beneath the layers of defiance and spin, she knew. The facts didn't care about the narrative, and this time, neither did the country. Meanwhile, TomHoman stood backstage at the Fox studios, adjusting his tie. He didn't need the makeup. He didn't need the teleprompter. He only needed the truth, and tonight he would deliver it with the precision of a sniper. The producer gave him the signal. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. Live. Sean Hannity's face filled the screen, eyes blazing with barely contained fury. Joining us now, former acting ICE Director TomHoman, here to discuss the breaking scandal rocking Capitol Hill. Homan leaned forward, voice calm, almost clinical. "Sean, this isn't complicated. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez knowingly hired an illegal alien into her congressional office. She used taxpayer money to pay him nearly $80,000 a year." Sean raised an eyebrow. "Tom, I have to ask, what does the law say about that?" Homan didn't hesitate. "Federal statute is clear. Aiding and abetting unlawful presence is a crime. Misappropriation of government funds is a crime. Harboring illegal aliens is a crime." He leaned even closer to the camera. "And the American people deserve to know. If you or I had done what AOC just did, we'd be behind bars already." The studio erupted with emails, texts, messages flashing across the ticker. Outside the bubble of D.C., the country was waking up, and it was furious. Back inside the Capitol, AOC's team scrambled to patch the dam before it burst. Drafts of press releases littered the conference table. Defender of immigrants, standing against racism, victim of political witch hunt, each slogan more desperate than the last. None of them addressing the crime, none of them undoing the damage. Late that night, AOC convened a private emergency meeting with select Progressive Caucus members. The room was thick with fear, not loyalty, self-preservation. Representative Ilhan Omar leaned in, voice low. If they can do this to you, they can do it to any of us. But even as she spoke, others exchanged glances, calculating, judging, deciding whether AOC was worth going down with. For the first time, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saw it, the beginning of abandonment, the political wolves circling, sensing weakness, preparing to feast. Across town, TomHoman sat with Benny, reviewing a draft letter addressed directly to the Attorney General. "We have everything lined up," Benny said. "Employment records, public funding trails, prior warnings about Diego's expired status." Tom nodded. "Good. We don't just expose this, we prosecute it." He tapped the letter twice against the table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. No mercy, no exceptions. The next morning, as AOC stumbled through a hastily arranged press conference, trying to recast herself as a victim of right-wing hate, TomHoman stood on the steps of the DOJ building. Microphones thrust toward him. Flashes popped. And with a voice steady enough to cut steel, he said, "Today, on behalf of every American who plays by the rules, I am formally calling for the criminal prosecution of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd, not because they didn't expect it, but because he said it. Flat, unapologetic, unstoppable. Inside her office, AOC watched the coverage unfold. The color drained from her face. No matter how loudly she screamed racism, no matter how many talking heads lined up to weep about oppression, no matter how many activist bloggers rushed to call Homan a fascist. The image was burned into the public's mind. A former federal law enforcement director standing before the Department of Justice, demanding her indictment. And for the first time since she burst onto the political scene with viral dance videos and catchy slogans, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez realized something far more terrifying than losing an election. She might actually lose her freedom. TomHoman didn't blink when the subpoenas started flying. He didn't gloat when the first leak confirmed the DOJ had quietly opened a criminal probe. He didn't celebrate when staffers from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's office began lawyering up. Because this wasn't a game. It was justice. And justice required precision. At dawn, a courier slipped a thick packet into Benny's hands. Inside, the linchpin, Diego de la Vega's unredacted background file, expired DACA status, 2 IC detainer notices, 1 warning issued directly to a congressional ethics officer, 3 months before his official hiring. Homan flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening with every revelation. "They knew," he growled. "They didn't stumble into this. They chose it." Benny whistled low. "This isn't negligence, Tom. This is conspiracy." Homan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next moves were already aligning in his mind. Not just exposure, prosecution, conviction, consequence. Meanwhile, inside the crumbling bastion of AOC's inner circle, panic metastasized into pure chaos. Conference calls screamed across 3 time zones. Crisis managers barked at each other over Zoom. Pollsters blurted bad numbers that nobody dared write down. And in the center of it all, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat hollow-eyed, staring through her aides like they were already ghosts. Her phone buzzed nonstop. DOJ inquiries, ethics complaints, media demands for comment, and worse, silent messages from allies once eager to bask in her spotlight, now ghosting her entirely. Her communications director, a new one hastily patched in from another office, whispered frantically, "We can pivot. Say Diego was a dreamer. Say he was a victim of Trump's policies. We'll paint you as a martyr." But even as he spoke, AOC knew it was too late. The country had stopped listening to excuses. The dam had broken, and the flood was coming for her. Across town, TomHoman wasn't waiting for mercy. At a packed press conference, he laid out the evidence with brutal clarity. Employment application with false identification numbers. Payroll authorizations signed personally by AOC. Internal emails warning her office of Diego's immigration status. Ignored. Each revelation slammed into the news cycle like a sledgehammer. CNN anchors stammered. MSNBC hosts blinked into the camera, searching for any thread to spin. They found none. Because facts didn't care about feelings. And facts didn't bleed when you called them racist. AOC tried to counterattack. She went live on Instagram that night, tears glinting in her eyes, voice trembling with carefully modulated emotion. "They're attacking me because I dared to stand with marginalized communities," she said. "This isn't about paperwork. It's about justice." But the comments flooded in faster than her moderators could delete. "You broke the law. Resign. No more excuses." The algorithm, once her greatest ally, turned merciless. Memes exploded across Twitter, side-by-side photos of Homan's press conference and AOC's livestream. Captions that needed no explanation. Facts versus feelings. The law versus the drama. Accountability versus excuses. Inside the DNC headquarters, the betrayal began. A closed-door emergency meeting saw prominent figures, once her most ardent backers, discussing survival, not solidarity. A veteran strategist spoke first. "She's radioactive now." Another nodded. "Cut her loose. Frame it as personal misconduct, not party failure." Even her closest allies whispered it privately now. Alexandria was no longer an asset. She was a liability, and Washington had no mercy for liabilities. At ICE headquarters, Benny pushed more evidence onto the table. Wire transfers from AOC's office to Diego's personal account. Payment authorizations disguised under vague project titles. Even a bonus listed suspiciously close to the date he publicly spoke at an open borders rally. TomHoman's mouth set into a grim line. "It's fraud. Misappropriation of federal funds. That's a felony." He picked up the phone again. "Draft the letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office. This time we're including the Financial Crimes Division." Meanwhile, desperate to regain control, AOC made one final gambit. She booked a primetime slot on CNN. 1 hour, no interruptions. An exclusive interview. She arrived dressed in white again. The color of revolution, of innocence, of martyrdom. But the cameras were less forgiving now. The lines of stress etched deeper into her face. The defiance dulled into something more brittle. The interviewer pressed harder than expected. Questions about ethics. Questions about knowingly employing an undocumented worker. Questions about the millions of dollars in public trust she had broken. And when AOC stumbled, when she blinked, when her voice caught, when the mask of righteous indignation cracked just for a moment, the nation saw it. Not a revolutionary, not a victim, a politician cornered by her own hubris. The moment went viral instantly. Clips flooded, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. A single line from AOC's defense became a meme within minutes. "I didn't read all the paperwork." Not a slogan, a confession, an indictment in 8 words. That same night, another leak confirmed what many had already suspected. The Department of Justice had convened a grand jury. Federal criminal charges were not only possible, they were imminent. And when Politico dropped the headline, "Sources, DOJ preparing indictment against Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for immigration violations and fraud," the last pillar of AOC's empire cracked and began to fall. Inside her darkened office, AOC sat alone. Her phone lay silent on the desk. The advisors were gone. The donors were gone. The media darlings were gone. All that remained was the echo of her own decisions, ricocheting through the ruins of a career built on defiance and destroyed by arrogance. The indictment hit the news cycle like a thunderclap. No leaks this time, no carefully crafted rumors, just a cold, brutal announcement from the Department of Justice. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, indicted on charges of aiding and abetting unlawful presence, misappropriation of federal funds, and obstruction of immigration enforcement. No spin, no cushion. Just the truth, dropped straight into the bloodstream of a nation already starved for accountability. Tom Homan stood outside the courthouse as the cameras whirred and the reporters shouted questions. He wore no smugness, no visible satisfaction, just the steady, relentless presence of a man who understood the difference between revenge and responsibility. He leaned into the microphones, voice low and calm. Today isn't about politics. It's about the rule of law. It's about sending a message to every public official. The rules apply to you, too. The crowd surged forward. Flashes popped like artillery fire. And for the first time in a long time, ordinary Americans watching from their homes, diners, and job sites felt something shift. A breath of fresh air through a house long closed and rotting. Inside the Capitol, the fallout accelerated. Progressive caucus members scrambled to delete old tweets of solidarity. Activist groups pulled endorsements. Major media outlets shifted from defense to distance. Even former allies issued statements heavy with condemnation and light on loyalty. The machine that once built Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had now turned to disassemble her, piece by calculated piece. In her apartment, shielded from the frenzy outside, AOC sat curled on a worn sofa, staring blankly at the TV screen. No staffers, no strategists, no damage control teams. Only the grim, lonely reality that came for everyone who believed themselves bigger than the truth. Her hands trembled slightly. She clutched her phone, staring at the last text message she had sent to a major donor. No reply. Not even a read receipt. The news looped endlessly. Pundits analyzing how the face of the progressive movement had imploded. Pollsters charting her catastrophic fall from grace. Former supporters debating whether she had always been too reckless, too radical, too arrogant. There was no refuge, no sanctuary. The digital mob she once wielded like a sword now turned upon her with a ferocity she had never imagined. Outside her building, small groups of protesters gathered, some with signs demanding her resignation, others simply chanting, "No more double standards." It wasn't hatred that filled the air. It was betrayal. The betrayal felt when a hero proves themselves hollow. At ICE headquarters, Tom Homan watched the coverage quietly. Benny hovered nearby but said nothing. He didn't need to. The moment belonged to something bigger than personal vindication. It belonged to the people who played by the rules and watched for too long as the powerful rewrote them. Late that evening, Homan walked the halls of the Justice Department. The building seemed different now, lighter somehow, less burdened by the knowledge that justice had become selective. In a small conference room, he met briefly with federal prosecutors. No cameras, no press releases, just men and women doing their jobs, as it should have always been. "The grand jury moves forward next week," a prosecutor said. "Full charges?" "Absolutely. We're not cutting corners." Homan nodded, satisfied. For years, he had watched politicians get away with crimes that would destroy any ordinary citizen. Tonight, the balance had shifted, and it would not be forgotten. Across the nation, the ripple effects grew stronger. Small-town mayors cited the case as proof federal immigration laws mattered. Sheriffs issued statements reaffirming their commitment to the rule of law. State legislators invoked the scandal as a reason to tighten oversight on elected officials. The awakening wasn't a roar yet, but it was a rumble, and it was growing. In New York's 14th Congressional District, the stronghold AOC once ruled like a queen. The mood darkened further. Local newspapers ran brutal editorials. Constituents called into radio shows, furious and embarrassed. A woman in Queens, once a vocal supporter, wept as she told a reporter, "She said she was for us. She said she would fight for us. She lied." The next morning, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood alone before a sparse crowd of reporters. No cheering crowds, no campaign banners, no slogans echoing off the marble walls. Only a scattering of journalists, pens poised like executioners' blades. She wore black. Her voice was thin but clear. "I will not seek re-election. I will step down immediately. I accept full responsibility for my actions." It was a statement crafted by lawyers, not conscience. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The empire built on defiance and outrage lay in ruins at her feet. Tom Homan watched the broadcast alone. When it ended, he rose, grabbed his old worn cap from the hook by the door, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. He didn't need a parade. He didn't need applause. He needed only the knowledge that tonight, somewhere in America, a kid flipping burgers, a mother juggling two jobs, a soldier standing watch on a faraway base, could look at the news and remember the system wasn't completely broken. Not yet. Not while men and women still stood ready to fight for it. As he walked down the cracked sidewalk, a passerby recognized him. An older man in a trucker's cap, a little rough around the edges, but with clear, steady eyes. He didn't ask for a photo. He didn't cheer. He just tipped his hat and said, "Thank you for standing up." TomHoman nodded once quietly and kept walking, because the fight for accountability wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but for today, for one precious, hard-earned moment, the good guys had won.